In terms of engagement, there's a term that needs explaining first, and that is stakeholders. A stakeholder refers to people, groups, or organizations who are influenced or have the ability to influence companies. These groups are the shareholders, employees, company suppliers, unions, interest groups, and the community. So what is engagement? It's the way in which companies choose to interact with stakeholders. And specifically, when a company wants to convey information, they use one of three strategies. So that is the stakeholder informational strategy, the stakeholder response strategy, and the stakeholder involvement strategy.
Okay, so for the stakeholder informational strategy, its aim is to convey positive company decisions, actions, and data to stakeholders in a way that causes stakeholders to think better about the company. Information in this model flows in one direction from company to stakeholders, and stakeholders do not provide any feedback. So the process for this strategy is only one step. It's sense giving, in that the company will decide on some data that it wants to convey to other people, and it will send out that information to them. The second strategy is the stakeholder response strategy. It's a two-way asymmetric communication, and it means that information is largely one way from company stakeholders, which is similar to the last strategy. However, it does aim to get limited feedback from stakeholders in order to determine stakeholder understanding or company success. In this model, it only attempts to influence stakeholders, although there may be some small influence on the company. For the process, this is two steps: one, sense making, and two, sense giving. Sense making is that the company will take the feedback it's received from users, it will change the data that it wants to present, and then it will send out the data. For the third strategy, stakeholder involvement strategy, it's two-way symmetric communication. It makes use of stakeholder feedback and active conversations to, one, change the company and stakeholders, and two, improve understanding for both parties. In this strategy, the process involves two steps: repeating as necessary in the iterative process until it's finished. In that, one, it will take feedback from active conversations, change the data, present the data, and as required, repeat the first step and second step until they have the desired result.
So from the three CSR communication strategies, Shell uses stakeholder informational strategy by effectively communicating in a one-way direction from corporate headquarters to stakeholders to positively reveal company plans, procedures, and data. Throughout their website, Shell communicates with its readers by telling them of their purpose instead of listening to the stakeholders, and having them provide feedback. In our opinion, they are encouraging stakeholders to believe in their decision making. This one-way use of communication is really effective for Shell because not only does it produce information and news for their stakeholders, but also it strengthens their responsibility with them by giving them positive support. This can be seen when Shell displays their message of conserving land in this slide. To ensure that favorable CSR decisions are communicated effectively, Shell has designed appealing concept messaging by visually showing us the operations procedure performed in their Athabasca oil sands. This form of messaging helps Shell demonstrate a generally shared representation of their production methods, and then as we see here, the procedures of their oil sands. By using this strategy, Shell has also made sure that stakeholders remain influenced by giving support and showing loyalty. No one is rioting or boycotting because of Shell's one-way communication is telling their stakeholders what their intentions are instead of asking them to help them out. By letting their stakeholders see exactly how they will conserve land, they have created a trustworthy communication environment. As we see here, this is a procedure of showing how they can conserve land.
So for this example, the contact us link, it's a stakeholder involvement strategy. For the link, it allows stakeholders to interact with company representatives of Shell regarding the different aspects of Shell, such as Indigenous relations or media inquiries. This allows for stakeholder feedback that can potentially persuade Shell into changing its policies. This is also an example of stakeholder involvement strategy. These two boxes here. And there are two examples of feedback that show stakeholders that Shell has a presence on social media and that companies are paying attention to what people are saying to them. Further, Twitter presence allows stakeholders in the company to influence each other through direct communication. Stakeholder information strategy. This box of text here is an example of that, and what it's doing is it's challenging. The challenge results are presented to stakeholders to show challenge and the company's success in order to help influence stakeholders. In this text, there's no place for feedback, and it's purely one-way communication. Stakeholder response strategy. The highlighted text from this portion of the website contains a link and encourages stakeholders to visit the site and participate in the Energy Diet Challenge. It's an example of stakeholder response because it has mostly one-way communication and provides limited indirect feedback in the form of participation in the challenge.
Alright, so Fueling Change was a program made to improve the environments across Canada, which included about 251 organizations who shared $6 million in grants. There were over 15 million votes, and they all went to the different projects that Shell offers. Fueling Change projects were then selected by the voters, and this is why this is the stakeholder involvement strategy. So Fueling Change engages stakeholders through the involvement strategy where persuasion comes from both the organization and the stakeholders themselves. This is seen when the organization allows Canadians to vote for different projects, which in turn affects where the money goes. So the decision is not left up to the organization, but to the stakeholders and the voters. Since this strategy works by a symmetric two-way communication, it builds relationships between the organization and its stakeholders. People have an opportunity for the voices to be heard, giving them a sense of ownership in the outcomes. The comments to the right show that the stakeholders were greatly affected by Fueling Change, and that by putting these on their site, Shell recognizes that the programs have influenced their company just as much. The company does not only influence the stakeholders, but seeks to be influenced as well. The comments explain how the program has built a strong relationship between Shell and the participating companies. Shell has participated in these programs because they understand that stakeholders need to be involved in order to promote positive support. Companies engage frequently and systematically with their stakeholders in order for both parties to explore mutually beneficial action, and this slide shows that continuing involvement with the different projects and stakeholders.
And what I took from this page is that the purpose was to give information and just showcase what they have done. The writing gives the impression that the NCC, or the Nature Conservancy of Canada, had full control over what was going on and where the money goes, and Shell was just handing out the money to go towards those projects. So the quote there saying, following are examples of NCC projects Shell has supported, kind of just states the point that it was their idea and that Shell was just giving them money for the projects. So the page is not looking for a response, it's simply just giving information. So there is the one-way communication. As you can tell with just the information right here, they're just giving out information, they're not asking for anything, no participation, anything like that. So the stakeholders have to find information on their own if they want to find anything else about what's going on here. They don't give them any links to go towards or any contact us, nothing like that. And so the stakeholders have to either support or oppose the information. Further persuasion. Have you ever been forced to follow something that you didn't have a say in? and that you were fully participating in, but you never got the choice, you never got to engage, anything like that. Would you prefer to present in a week that wasn't so swamped, or hand in an essay that maybe a few weeks beforehand, a few weeks after, have the choice in that? Would you like the school's money to go towards lowering tuition instead of building that building outside that I don't know if any of us know what exactly it's going to be? Would you like a choice? Would you like to participate? Why engage? When stakeholders engage, they, in communication with the business, they influence over some actions that the corporate goes through. If you have your voice heard, you can have your voice heard through social media, surveys, and this changes outcomes that the corporate chooses to do. And you can be part of a group, so it creates changes and it starts movements when you're able to engage.
So for the persuasion part of Shell True North Forest, we said that they lacked stakeholder engagement. So to persuade that, we said listen more instead of telling all the time, because we feel like instead of the one-way communication that Shell does, all they're doing is telling their stakeholders what to do, and there's limited participation that goes into the procedures and actions that the company makes. So we said also use two-way communication strategies such as stakeholder involvement strategy or response strategies to help stakeholders engage in more principles with the company. So we also said base engagement on widely held principles. What that means is basically have principles set that everyone can engage in instead of having something that most of the stakeholders don't want any kind of involvement in, just so that everyone has a saying and everyone can get a saying too.